All right, looks like we are live on Facebook. So, welcome everyone. So, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about grief and loss and changes and how to find happiness even when you're going through those. No, so Mark, yes, this week I've been kind of a little bit later, and going forward, next week I'm going to be testing out some new times. So be patient with me. Do you like this later time or do you prefer earlier? Like, kind of let me know in the chat what you guys think of what would be the ideal time because I am going to test a few things next week to see what works. So let me know what kind of time frame works. If you're not able to actually be here for the live, um, before 10 p.m. Eastern time or Pacific? Eastern. Okay, before 10. Okay. So Eastern. Okay, perfect. So before 10 p.m. Okay. Then I'll pull the time back. So for those that are watching on Facebook, make sure that you type in the comments of what would work for you guys. So, like I said, tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about um, dealing with grief and loss. And you might be thinking, but Tina, you're a happiness coach. Why are you talking about something so heavy? And it's because those are the kinds of emotions, those can really leave us feeling sad, depressed, sometimes even angry at the changes. I know a lot of times one of the stages that you go through in the grieving process is anger. You might be angry for the person for leaving you, even if they passed away. And although that doesn't make logical sense, it's sometimes how we will go through that because it is part of the process of just trying to feel like we have some sort of control over the situation. And anger feels a lot more powerful. Um, Fertility, pregnancy. Um, so anger feels a lot more powerful than sitting in the feelings of loss where we don't have control over the situation. And even though we've gone through this, and even though we know death is part of life for all of us at one point or another will die. We have no idea when that is going to happen. And the thing is the more and the deeper that we love someone, the harder that loss is on us. And now these aren't just losses that happen um, at the end of life, right? So these these are changes that happen as we go through life, and we can experience this on various levels. And I remember my first experience of death was my cat. Um, Now we had some hamsters, we had some birds. They died, so I was aware of death, but I didn't bond with them. So it didn't have that emotional pain as much. It's like, oh, it's sad, and then, being a kid, I just kind of forgot. It's like, okay, the bird's gone, good. Now I don't have to clean its cage. And I know that's a little bit heartless. For those of you that have birds, please forgive me. But it wasn't until I lost my first cat. That was devastating. And it was devastating for two reasons. Is one, so before I dive into the story, I want to introduce myself for those of you that are new to my channel. My name is Tina. I'm a happiness coach, and a lot of times I will talk about past trauma. I have been through complex PTSD, and so sometimes I will talk about the experiences from my childhood because it also shapes how I've dealt with things in my adulthood and how I've dealt with the emotions around it. And the whole point of being a happiness coach is to help you deal with those more difficult emotions. And so I will talk about some of my experiences and I will give you reference points in hopes that you can take away some tools in order to apply to your life and help you through those challenges. Okay. Um, and I also will sometimes talk about change management because these recovery tools I was able to use in the corporate world, and they're very similar to the tools that are used for change management, and they helped deal with change. And so, whenever there's any change, there is always a process of loss. Even if that's a good change, you have to give up your old ways to move into the new ways. And so that still has an emotional process. Now, if you're not as attached to that old way, then it's easier for you to move through the grieving process. Um, if you're very attached to that old way, you didn't choose the loss to happen or the change to happen, then it's going to be harder to process those emotions and understanding what the steps are and how to get through that is one of the ways that helped me. Now, what I want you to understand too is just because you're aware of the steps, it doesn't always take away the pain, and it's not supposed to. And I think sometimes people get confused and they think, oh, if I'm happy, then I should never experience pain. Well, that's not the case. In fact, in order to live a full life, we are going to experience pain. And it's a matter of understanding that pain, embracing it, and learning to move through that in a way that it doesn't hold you back. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, Frisha. Thank you for the rose. I appreciate you. And so, this process of going through the grieving experience, I'm going to talk about my first time because how your first time of dealing with a major change or a loss or a death, right? How that is dealt with and how you experience that in childhood is going to be how you end up dealing with those patterns in adulthood. Okay. So, my first experience of loss where it was hard for me to process was when I lost my cat. And my cat, this cat, my mom brought it home from her factory work area. And it's funny because she brought her home in a cardboard box, and she was a black and white tuxedo cat. And at first, because it was so close to Easter, I thought she got me a bunny, and I was excited. And then I saw it was a cat, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And this cat was a little bit semi-feral, so nobody could really touch it except me. Like her and I bonded. I called her Miss Mew because at the time on the TV there were cat food commercials with a cat, and they called her Miss Mew. And I think it was for Friskies, maybe, I'm not sure. But because of that, I named her Miss Mew. And she was my cat. And every night before bed, I would hunt her down and I would take her to bed with me and I would make her say prayers with me. And I would do this by sticking her under the sheets, and all of the sheets were all tucked in and like she couldn't get out except for crawling up. And so this was a nightly ritual that I had. So, and she was actually a protector for me. So, I grew up in a home where I was sexually abused, and one of the things is she used to attack my abuser, and she would scratch him up, and when she'd like protect me. Like, and I know, yeah, you're like, what? A cat protecting? No, she was very protective. She did not want him in my room. And so shortly after a couple of attacks from her, next thing I know, I'm being told that my cat is going to be put down because I wasn't taking proper care of her. I wasn't scooping her litter and often enough, and I wasn't feeding her and taking care of her the way I should. And I was maybe in grade 3 or so. And so I had to, uh, we were taking her to the animal shelter, and we were surrendering her. We were giving her up for adoption because I was bad. I didn't take care of her. So that was a huge loss. And that was one where it was also, normally kids will take on the responsibility themselves, and they will blame themselves for this. But this was one where I was directly blamed for what was happening and that this was my fault. And the thing is that was one of the damages from the abuse. It was only through recovery that I was able to look back on that situation and realize that it wasn't because of me not doing the right thing. It wasn't because of me not doing my chores. It was because the abuser wanted to get rid of the threat that was blocking him from access to me in the evenings. And so when you learn to, because it's like I carried that blame, that shame my entire life, right? So understanding as I went through that, um, and I remember coming home and I was so devastated that I had lost my cat, and I begged and I pleaded and I cried and I bargained, which is another part of the grieving process. So first you're in denial. So I was in denial the entire car ride to the shelter. And then um, going through that bargaining process of, you know, trying to do anything. It's like, I'll do more chores. I'll be good. I promise I won't give any more problems. I will take care of her. Please don't take her, right? And now I don't know if this was the case um or if that was what I was told. But I remember my mom telling you her and telling me that we couldn't get her back because when she took her into the shelter, they said that they had to put her down. And I lost it completely at that point. And I was really devastated by that news. And the thing is this was done on St. Patrick's Day. And so because of that, hey Chris, good to see you. Because of that situation, it was also an anniversary thing. So around March 17th, I would start to get depressed for two reasons. One, because it was usually around March break, and that meant being at home more. And I hated being at home. I loved being at school. And I wanted to be at school as much as possible because there was predictability, there was consistency, there was structure that was at school. And I thrived in that environment, as most kids do. And the chaos of home and the violence and the drinking and the abuse and all of those kind of things and the manipulation that was done by the abuser was something that I just didn't want to be around. So when March break would come around, I would go through this sadness. And I could never understand where was this sadness coming from because nothing was going on. There was nothing that was causing it. But sometimes it's because of these events that happen at certain time frames and we don't connect the dots. And it's like when we connect the dots, we're like, oh, that's what's going on, because there would be little flashes of memories of my cat or things that had happened and how I had missed her and all of those things, and not realizing that that was part of the grieving process. So sometimes anniversary dates, especially if a loved one is passed, the first Christmas without them, the first birthday without them, the first whatever event is a reminder, and you go through that whole loss again. And that's part of the sadness of when you lose someone, whether it's a relationship breakup, it is a death of a family member, any of those kind of things, they're going to bring up these feelings. And you may not make the connection right away of where these feelings are coming from. And so we may have experiences of sadness or depression. You're depressed, but you don't know why. You're anxious, but you don't know why. And it's because of sometimes of understanding that there were these events that happened and seeing that they're connected and correlated. Now, it doesn't always mean that way. Sometimes it is something that's going on today. Sometimes it's just the memory of an event that you've been through in the past, and maybe it's just a flash of a memory. And then next thing you know, you're feeling down and you're not sure where it's coming from. So it's so important to be able to be very mindful of your thoughts and the emotions that come afterwards. So when you start finding yourself feeling depressed, you start finding yourself feeling anxious. And to you, you're thinking, oh, it's for no reason. I'm like, no, it absolutely is. Even if it was just the thought of an experience. The thought of an experience will evoke emotions within us. And that can be the thought of like, oh, what if I screw something up? And now you feel anxious, but you kind of push that out of your thoughts because you're like, okay, I'm not really doing that. So logic kind of kicks in and you go about your day. But then there are these constant reminders of different things, of different thoughts that come into your head. They still evoke an emotional response within you. And so when you're feeling these feelings of anxiety or depression or sadness, and you're like, I don't even know where this is coming from, it just happens. I'm like, no, it doesn't just happen. And it is important to do that inner work to make that connection of what that is. And it could just be a split second of a thought, and then it moves out of your frame of reference because you're on to the next thing. And being able to trace where those thoughts are coming from, what happened, what triggered them too, is important. So this could be you read something online, somebody said something in a certain tone, you had the uh, uh, a trigger of somebody playing certain music or a certain scent. Maybe it's a certain smell. Maybe, you smell a fresh baked apple pie. It's not always a bad thing of things that'll trigger you. You smell a fresh baked apple pie and it reminds you of your grandmother who passed away 10 years ago. And you feel a little bit sad, but you kind of still go about your day. And it's these accumulation of these unprocessed emotions that end up causing some of the depression, the anxiety, the mystery label that you are label that you want to put on it because you're not able to understand where the connection is. And when you can make those connections, when you can connect the dots and trace it back to where this is coming from, it now allows you something solid that you can start processing those emotions of what's going on. And once you've gone through that grieving process, and you've gone through it thoroughly the first time, that when it comes up and it repeats, then what ends up happening is you're able to recognize it and go, oh, okay, that's just this that's happening. And you might still feel sad and you might feel depressed or you might feel anxious, but it's now not going to have that same hold on you. And it's the inability to make that connection of what's going on that causes a lot of the trauma. At least that's the way I have experienced it. And so some other people may argue me and they may say, no, that's not right textbook wise, Tina, and it's this and that. I am not a psychologist. I am not a neurobiologist. I am not, a doctor, nor do I play one on TV. However, I am just sharing what my personal experience, strength, and hope is, and how I have seen this, how I've processed it, and how it actually makes sense for me to allow me to move on and not stay stuck in those emotions. So, the grieving process, the first stage is denial. We deny it affects us. We're like, no, 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 I'm okay, I'm fine. Yeah, I understand. So you're very much in this logical process, and this happens a lot. You'll see this when somebody has passed away, and now you have to go through the process of arranging the funeral and doing all of those things. So you don't have that full luxury of being in your emotions. Yes, you're sad. Yes, you will cry or be upset or have these things, these emotions to deal with, but you're still much more in your head because there are things that you need to get through. You still need to process day-to-day living. And so that causes you to compartmentalize those emotions and put them to the side. Um, hey, Katie. And so because of that, you do have to go back, and so that is a small way that we deny our emotions. It's like, it's not time, it's not safe, I can't deal with this right now. Those are the kinds of ways that we are telling ourselves we can't deal with those emotions, and that might be true. And if it's too much, you're not supposed to rip somebody else's cloak of denial off of them. That's there for their protection because they cannot deal with those emotions at that time. So everybody will go through this process in a different pace. And it's okay for you to go through it at a pace that is comfortable for you. So if you stay in denial, that you're like, yeah, I'm okay. It's fine. Like, I understand they were sick for a long time. They had a good life. This is kind of how you'll that's how you recognize somebody is in that denial stage. Doesn't affect me. I'm fine. I'm fine. Just walk it off. It's good, right? Yeah, I you shed a couple of tears, but overall you're still, it's fine. you know, this is just what it is, kind of thing, right? So it could be a breakup of a relationship, and you might be saying, hey, it is what it is. I should have expected as much, blah, blah, blah. You are denying your feelings. Next stage is anger. Because when you go through that next stage, you start to become aware of these feelings, and you're like, why do I have to friggin' feel all this? Why, like, that person, they left me, they passed away, and now I have all these things to deal with. I have these bills. There's now fighting with family members of the will and all of that kind of stuff. And keep in mind, people, if you are going through a loss, everybody who lost that person is going to be dealing with this in a different way. And it's a matter of giving them care, giving them kindness, compassion, even if you are also suffering. Extend what little love that you have to ease the fear of whoever is also lost. And you deserve that for yourself as well. So know that if you are not operating as your best self because of the loss, then give yourself that kindness and compassion and care, um, as you go through this process. And know that you will be able to get to the other side, and recognizing these stages. So if you find that you're getting short tempered, you're, you know, irritable, and you're short fuse, you just want to criticize, everything is bothering you, right? Then know that you're probably in that anger phase. You've This is a good sign, even though it doesn't feel good. It is a good sign that you're moving through this. And if this isn't linear, so sometimes you may bounce back and forth between denial and anger, and then the next stage, which is bargaining. Well, if I do these things, will you come back? Obviously, if somebody's dead, then you can't do that. But You might find yourself bargaining with God or bargaining with yourself of like, you know what, I'm not going to let this go. I don't want to change their room. I don't want to get rid of their stuff just yet. I want to hold on to it and I'll just hold it a little bit longer. And you will go back and forth with being able to get to the acceptance of the loss. The next stage is after bargaining is sadness. And this can be a really hard um, phase to go through, and make sure that you get some support as you're going through this. You have to be able to allow yourself to actually cry and to grieve this. Journaling helps a lot with processing the emotions. If you've lost a loved one, writing a letter to them where you wish that you could hear their voice again or get their advice one more time, or sitting and imagining what their hug felt like. Um, and it'll be little things that'll trigger some sadness. And it could be, you know, finding a piece of something of theirs in the house, and it might remind you of a memory that brings up happiness, but it also brings up sadness because now you no longer have that. And this is why it's so important to be as present as possible as you are going through your life. Yes, it's going to cause you pain when you lose them because we will all lose somebody, right? We will, whether it's a friend that we had in school and we moved away and now we don't see them as much, it's still a loss. If it is a work environment that you were in and now you're no longer in, that's still a loss. And that is a change, even if it's good change, is um, hard to process, especially as you're going through the sadness one. But I want you to take heart when you're in this particular phase of the grieving process. It's important to feel those emotions as fully as you can and not try to stifle them down, because this will allow you to process through those emotions at a much faster pace, and you won't have to go back to it as much. And if you do, it's okay. Allow yourself the space, the time to go through that grieving process. Give yourself whatever support that you need. If you need more alone time, if you need more companionship time, these are things. Give yourself what you need in this particular time. It's really important. And comfort yourself as if you would a best friend or a family member that you saw them hurting, you saw them sad, and just be there for yourself as you go through this. And some of the comfort, so find your comfort rituals, right? That could be getting your favorite blanket and curling up on the couch with a pillow and watching your favorite movies, right? Um, I have one. It's funny. This is a little bit of a ritual that I have when I feel sick, like I have a cold, I'm not feeling well, and um, one of the things that I like to watch when I'm not feeling well is I like watching zombie movies like The Walking Dead. I don't know. It's like they're ambling around and not with it. It's kind of like I resonate, right? So it's just kind of like one of those low. Um, I can just sit and be entertained, and I don't have a whole lot of brain power when I'm feeling that way. So give me a blanket, give me some snacks, give me some tea, and throw on The Walking Dead or something like that, and I will just sit back and watch it and just sit there trying to breathe. Right? So give yourself comfort as you go through the grieving process. That may be, you know, something you will know what it is for you. Um, whether that's going out and doing an activity that you guys used to do together. That could be writing that letter to them, telling them how much you miss them, how much you really wish that they were there, and just allow yourself to feel those emotions. And the more that you're able to do that to the fullest extent, the faster you're going to get to the next level, which is acceptance, where you understand what has happened. Katie, where you understand what has happened, but now it doesn't have that weight, that heaviness that is holding you down. It's kind of like the clouds have parted and the sun has come back out. And while you know that things are now different, and you may still feel that emptiness, and that's okay, but you also now understand that you are still alive. And your loved ones that have passed on would want you to live your life to the fullest because they no longer get to. So allowing yourself to now start to branch out and to start to re-experience life is part of that acceptance phase where you can um, now go out and somebody might say something that reminds you of the loved one that you lost. And instead of bursting out into tears or feeling that stab in your heart, you now are like, yeah, you remember them in a different way. And it doesn't have that sting anymore. So know that as you go through the grieving process, you still are living your life. And it is important to find the little experiences of happiness, even in your grief, even in your sorrow. And that can be really hard when you're in the earlier stages of grieving because all it does is remind you of the loss and it can be painful. And it can be um, something that you want to stay in that denial. You don't want to look at the situation. You don't want to feel those feelings that you've lost that person. And it's important to go through this and find little bits of happiness as you move through the grieving process, finding different ways to bring yourself comfort, to bring yourself care, and building that toolbox of what that looks like for you and to give yourself grace during this period and give the people around you. Yes, Nino, I did paint the paintings behind me and I use them in my thumbnails on my YouTube channel. And there's links for where you can purchase that. If you go to my TikTok bio, it'll take you to Redbubble where you can purchase the links. If you want the originals, you'd have to message me. But yeah, you can get it in all different formats. So thank you for asking about the paintings. Um, this is one of the things that I do to comfort myself as I go through the grieving process for various changes that happen in life, right? Um, and this allows me to be present and it allows me to create something. And there's nothing more symbolic of life than creation, right? Life is creation. And so, even if you don't have a whole lot of artistic talent, and maybe you think, I'm not an artist and all I can do is draw stick figures, well, draw stick figures because those work as well, right? So whatever it is, and it's just a matter of learning and practicing. I like the fluid art technique. One, I can get a painting done fairly quickly and it's complete compared to the ones that I paint by hand. And that being said, these aren't easy, and there's some that just turn out, and I'm like, I get frustrated with it, but um, I do enjoy this stuff. But the ones that I have to paint by hand, there's stages and that you have to wait for drying time and then it's longer. And um, with my ADHD tendencies, it is hard to sometimes go back to the painting. So I prefer things that I can start and then finish, start and then finish. I don't like a long drawn out process, although sometimes that can be beneficial, right? So longer projects that you continue to work on, right? They're really rewarding, and actually those are the paintings that people usually ooh ah over the most, are the ones that I took the most time in the greater level of detail. So you can check that out on my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125, and there's links there. Okay, and guys, so the grieving process, you're going to go through denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then finally acceptance. And knowing what that process is and knowing what stage that you're in. And this can happen with multiple different things. So there's the big grieving, when somebody passes away, but there's also little grieving when you make changes. And the recognizing that even if it's a little change, like maybe you change something in your diet or change something in your workout, you have to go through these little bit of emotions, or at least recognize the stages, right? You might be like, I'm ticked off, I'm angry because I wanted to, be able to have that snack, or, I wanted to be able to do it the old process, whatever it was, if it's a work environment thing. It's like, I like the old system better. Why'd they have to go and change it? That happens a lot, right? And you go back and forth with, well, I'm not going to do the new system. I'm just going to put it on a spreadsheet. I've seen that happen many times. And then it can also be, you know, then when you get to the sad part, it's like, oh, yeah, we don't get that old system back. We don't get that old person back. We don't get that um, old way of behaving back. We have to move forward in the new way. And that can bring up feelings of sadness and loss. And we will go through that and then get to the acceptance point. Okay, so guys, I hope that you found this helpful. For those of you that are grieving, I'm sending you loving, healing energy to any of you that have experienced a loss, and hope that you find ways to bring yourself comfort, because you actually deserve that comfort. You deserve that support. Okay, so guys, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we will talk again tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye.